what circumstances would you support fracking?
I would support fracking as long as we can ensure that people's lives are not in danger, their homes are not in danger. Because right now there's currently a crisis in Flint, Michigan, in which they are undergoing water contamination. And that is certainly something that we don't want to happen in this state. So we need to ensure that where fracking happens, it happens in a safe and responsible manner. And I am primarily motivated by job creation, and this is something that has been a boon for our economy, and which has created jobs. And we should certainly not stray away from it. We should do what we can to make sure that we do it in a responsible manner.
Okay, I'm against fracking completely as it is now. There's no way to dispose of the waste that fracking provides. This was a thing that was set up by the Koch brothers and the energy industry to say that we can't do any research into it, we can't regulate it at all. It's just happening. It's bad enough here. I've been with friends in Greene County, Pennsylvania, which has been completely ripped up by fracking and well pads and an explosion at a well pad. And I travel a lot. I've been visiting all the counties within 300 miles of here in alphabetical order. So I went to Belmont County, Ohio, which is near St. Clairsville. It's on the Ohio River, and it's also ripped up. They're just roads through the woods. They just chop everything up. They dump their waste wherever they want. The trucks. There's no regulation at all. It's just, I don't know. I think it's horrible, and there needs to be regulations and safety factors put in should have been put in before they let them start, but that didn't happen. And I was at a doctor's office the other day, and the technician told me that she had moved. She likes to live out in the country, but she works here. She lived in Greene County, and she and her husband couldn't stand it there anymore. They moved to Garrett County, Maryland, because there's no fracking in Maryland. And you can see the difference when you go into Maryland, how much prettier it is, how much more beautiful, and how much more you would want to go and do recreational stuff there. So I'm against it completely at this point.
And I'm going to second that. About a month ago, there was an opportunity to go out to Blacksville where they were holding a community forum on fracking. And so I thought, what better way to go out and learn a little bit more about what's going on. When I walked into the building, what happened is that before I was allowed to proceed into a chair, I had to give them all of my contact information. That kind of made me just a tad bit suspicious. So they informed me that if I didn't, I couldn't sit down. So obviously I provided them with the information. But what I heard really had nothing to do with the actual process of fracking. It had to do with them trying to convince landowners that they were going to be able to be their source of a great retirement. What they were trying to do is convince people that fracking was the answer for the future. However, there was no defined plan on how that was going to happen. So for 1.5 hours, I listened to the salesman try to convince them that fracking was going to be their way out of the situation that we're in here in West Virginia, out in the Blacksville area. People kept trying to ask questions about how are you going to do it? How far is it going to be from my home? How close is the closest water source? There were no questions that they actually answered. And the next thing I know, they start bringing out contracts. They're trying to get people to sign contracts without all the information. When those are the type of meetings that are being held by local fracking companies that are trying to convince West Virginia property owners to sign over their property in order for them to make a profit, questions were asked about, what am I going to make? What am I going to gain? Well, we won't be able to really clearly define that until we can actually determine how much we pump out. Well, there has to be a dollar amount. Every place we go, there's a standard. We pay $2.09 for a gallon of gas. So if you're going to be fracking on my property, how much are you going to set that rate at? You don't say, Well, it depends on how much we pump. So I am not knowledgeable enough in the actual fracking process. I am totally convinced that we're not prepared to do this. As we are looking at fracking, New York State is running away from it. They've seen those results. They've seen the damage it's done to the property. They've seen the damage that it's done to the water system. So until we come up with a better source of information, define rules and regulations, I'm absolutely opposed.
Well, I'm going to stand up, and I can't believe all of you have sat here this long without wanting to move around. I invite the rest of you to, I'm going to move around a little bit just because I'm getting stiff. I hope you all stretch. Mike Manny is back there, and he and I were involved in the fracking wars a couple of years ago. We lost, and we fought our hearts out to try to make sure there was enough money for inspections, that there were safety protections on the job, that surface owners especially had their rights protected. The way our laws in West Virginia is, and please move around. I mean, I appreciate that you are so faithful and sticking around. And the only thing I can say about fracking is things aren't going to change until we change faces in the legislature. They went after Mike big time. He's not there anymore, and I'm very, very sad about that. The way our law is with the surface owners, say, for example, the gas is going to be drilled here, and there's a person here whose family 50 years ago or 100 years ago gave away their surface right. The gas company has the right to use reasonable means to get the gas underneath the surface owner, which means they don't have to pay anything. They can put the drill rig right on that surface owner's property. It's awful. And we do have it right over in Wetzel County. It's totally torn up in the next county over. It sort of starts over there by the western end of our county, but we have to have a lot of different people. People are afraid in the legislature that this is an industry that could, that we have a little Saudi Arabia under West Virginia, and it could be the solution to all our problems, and that if we do regulate it, that we're missing an enormous opportunity. But there's a very influential person in town who leaned over to me at a Rotary meeting and said, Barbara, that gas has been there for thousands of years. We don't have to bring it up right now. So things would have to really change in the legislature to do very much about fracking.
Part of the work that we do is test people's drinking water wells, and we've had lots of opportunities to test wells to document water quality before fracking has occurred, and then from time to time we get called in after fracking in order to document whether pollution has been caused. And in some cases it hasn't, and in some cases it has. And I can think of one case in particular on the Doddridge County line where a family lost their drinking water well due to bad handling of the fluids from fracking. So anytime you hear somebody just claim flat out that fracking never has polluted people's drinking water, that's just flat out false. It's happened right here in West Virginia. Another thing related to fracking in West Virginia and Pennsylvania is that we got out ahead of the science. A lot of fracking started to take place in the late 2000s, and a lot of the basic science hadn't been done in terms of the types of pollution that could occur and what could be done to prevent it. And that means that even though the laws were changed when Barbara and Mike were in the legislature back in 2011, and they were upgraded substantially, they're still not necessarily as protective as they need to be in terms of setbacks and other types of standards. So a lot of research is continuing. People are publishing peer-reviewed articles on what they learn. So the science is evolving, and we need to make sure that we pay attention to that science and that the laws and the regulations that are in place keep up with the science so that if fracking is going to occur, it's going to be protective of water and other resources. We also need to make sure that whatever laws and regulations we have in place are properly enforced, and that's a big issue in West Virginia. Even though we have more inspectors now than we did 5-10 years ago, it's not necessarily enough. So companies need to be held accountable for what they do in a consistent way so that they decide it's in their interest to do the right thing.
I love answering this question because I've had some personal experience with fracking, and I have an opportunity to share an anecdote. A few years ago, when I was still assessor, probably around 2012, we had two gas wells drilled across the river in the industrial park, and the ladies on my third floor computer room began coming to me to complain that their computer screens were vibrating. Not all the time, but just occasionally. So something we kind of kept an eye on, but on one occasion, someone felt the entire the building was vibrating, and it evacuated the entire courthouse. But these ladies had some computer savvy, and they found a website at the WVU Geology Department that connected them with the seismograph that was in this building at that time. And they noticed that each time that their computer screens began vibrating, that the seismograph was showing seismic activity. So it would appear that there is some connection between earthquakes and fracking. But at any rate, I believe that I support fracking in most cases. Shale gas is essential, has become essential to West Virginia's economy, but only in cases where there is no threat of damage to people, life, or property. And I feel that the people doing the drilling should be required to post sufficient bond to cover the costs of any damage that they may cause to surrounding property.
Fracking and oil and gas related legislation is inherently flawed in the state of West Virginia. Barbara started to get into a little bit of the battle she fought, and actually sat in Mike Minniepenny's office and absorbed knowledge. If fracking could be done cleanly, efficiently, employ West Virginians, pay a good wage, and be a career, I might sign on. But as I sat in Mike Minniepenny's office, there was a gentleman, I can't remember who it was, that said, they're telling everybody we have 100 years worth of gas, natural gas, shale gas. And that's what everybody was running with, 100 years, 50 years. You were hearing a lot of numbers. One thing that Mike and this gentleman pointed out in that office were they weren't talking about 100 years worth of jobs. They were talking about 100 years worth of shale gas. The gentleman in the room said we'd be lucky to have 5 years worth of that boom, have jobs, massive amounts of jobs. He was right. As our coal miners are laid off, many of the people that worked in the oil and gas industry that are from this state, that pay taxes in this state, are laid off. I support industry that employs West Virginians. No more corporate welfare for those wanting to bring their employees from out of state. If you want what we have, you employ our people. Our greatest resource is our people, and they deserve a fair wage and a fair opportunity.
It's something important to lay out a few things that come to mind. It's important to recognize that we already sort of went through, we've seen what a natural gas boom looks like. So it's important to recognize that natural gas won't be the silver bullet that it's portrayed to be. And secondly, even if it did create this long sustained boom, as Billy points out, it's a finite resource. Once again, we're going to kick the can down the road, and politicians and policymakers are going to be having the same kind of conversation in 80 years. Well, what are we going to do? How are we going to retrain all these natural gas workers? And we need to find a more permanent solution to that. Secondly, this has been indicated too, it's an industry that is great for Texans, great for Louisianians, and great for Oklahomans because that's who come in and work the jobs. If we are going to commit to it, if we do decide as policymakers that it is something, then I think we do need to make it so that West Virginians can at least be employed within the industry. From a water point of view, the study which I'm the most familiar with was the EPA study conducted last June, which came to the conclusion that there is evidence of water contamination, but when it has happened, it's not widespread and systemic. It's rather localized from where the fracking was occurring. I think we need to approach this situation with balance, okay? And part of that balance is ensuring that fracking is paying its dues to West Virginia, and those dues being paid in the form of severance taxes. Severance taxes that we may collect so that we may have a strong DEP to regulate the industry, to ensure that bad things aren't happening in these wells. And at the same time, perhaps if we can employ West Virginians, if it's done safely,